Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I've actually been awake since 6. Oh God. So, so I'm here to continue my read-along review for To Be Night and Beguile, Book 2, Chapter 7. Damn it! Submerged and set free. Let's see here. Philippe and Celeste in their cottage. A late night fog haunted the streets of Welshport, heavy and cold, obscuring the truths of the village, and only showing its quaint small town kirks of little homes, with glowing windows, perfect, picturesque, and completely misleading. Over in a small neighborhood, a cottage was quiet and warm, in the earth a boiling pot of tea, tending to by Celeste Divini, who had just come home from her horrible night at Terramore House with Jacob, where he blackmailed her into bed. She com- she contemplated what she had done over and over in her mind. She wanted him dead now, not only for the terrible things she had done to others, but now for what he had done to her. Was her family secret that terrible and destructive that, if exposed, could truly ruin Celeste's life? To her, the answer was yes. It would not only break the bonds in her own life, but that or her entire family. Celeste sat on her knees staring into the fire and watched the tea kettle boil over into the fire. She cried her heart out thinking about how horrible she felt for sleeping with Jacob, betraying Philip, and allowing him to control her this way. She failed so much herself, her relationship, and even Celeste and Sabrina, whom she had made a pact with to kill Jacob once and for all. Celeste, a sleepy voice said from behind her. What's the matter? What? Oh, nothing, nothing, Celeste said, wiping her eyes. You've been crying. What happened? He asked, rushing over to her and helping her up from her seated position. I'm just having one of those days. Don't jump to any conclusions. I was just thinking of Evie and how much I missed her, Celeste replied. Have you been able to contact her? He asked, believing her. No, they won't let me see her or speak at all. It's been very hard to pretend that she has never even existed. The family doesn't even speak of her anymore, Celeste said of the Lords. Not even Rebecca? They seem to be getting close up until and even after Sebastian died, Philip said, remembering he knew Sebastian was alive. It's as if she wasn't even there, Celeste replied, sitting on a small kitchen table with her tea. And Jacob, how it's been working with him, Philippe asked to a sudden stunned Celeste. Jacob, well, he's, Jacob. Not much you can do with him, if that makes any sense. I tend to try to just focus on Charlotte and keep out of his way, Celeste mentioned, lying to him. I would hate for him to be bothering you. You would tell me if he was bothering you, right? Philippe asked. Just wanted to tell him everything. Celeste looked into his eyes and saw how much he loved her, how much he wanted to protect her, no matter what, and all she could do was lie to him over and over again. It was too much for her to be honest. Philip could never know. I swear I'll stop mispronouncing it. It it would not only destroy their relationship, but the truth about Celeste's family would most certainly come out, and she would alone, washed up, done. Of course, Celeste replied, smiling sweetly. He smiled back and walked up to her. She lifted her chin up gently so their eyes met. Two sets of deep brown pools of love and trust. He leaned down and kissed her deeply. The hot heat from their passion kiss could have reheated and boiled the tea in their teacup again. She loved him so much, and he loved her back. As that night progressed, he picked her up in his arms and carried her to their bedroom where they made love. This was true love, true passion in their moments of ecstasy, skin to skin, heart to heartbeat, or sorry, sweaty touch to sweaty touch. Celeste knew she could not let Jacob destroy her. What she had, her secrets now accumulating, would be kept forever for Philip, for their love. Sebastian, so, yep. Wincliffe Sanitarium had windows towards the back of the main building that went from floor to ceiling. They were slender and long. In the center window, a double door etched into its thin glass, and the reflection of the window was Mary Good's new face, the face of Georgina Kent. Mary stared into the hospital with her new eyes, and next to her, without a single glow of a reflection in the moon's light, was Sebastian Lord, pale and cold like anything without a soul would be. The two of them had made it around the building, and were determined to get Evie, no matter what. Mary, now going by the name of Georgina to match her new body, looked around to see if the door could be opened. She checked and couldn't see any way in. Sebastian put his hand up against the glass and closed his eyes. The glass began to heat up along with his hand, and then, out of nowhere, the glass shattered. He pushed his hands through the cracked pieces, and they fell to the floor. He reached in and unlatched the lock. Push, Sebastian said in a whisper. Georgina took a deep breath and began to realize they were really going into the hospital. She had to complete the pact she made with Sebastian as payment for helping her get the new face she was wearing. Georgina walked in and Sebastian followed. They slowly made their way through the dark corridors of the hospital, step by step, not knowing where they were going. Sebastian closed his eyes and walked as if he could feel Evie's heart pounding in his mind. In fact, he could. He could sense her, feel her. Everything about Evie was beguiling to Sebastian. He missed her. He needed to be with her again. It's as if the love he had for her intensified while he was in the other world, the world of the dead. He had become obsessed. And to Georgina, it felt as if perhaps he was going a bit mad in the process. Remember, Georgina is now married. They passed room after room, each one darker and more awful than the last. The smell of wet clothes and mothballs made Georgina cover her nose as they continued down the hallways and into a larger part of the hospital where orderlies busily cleaned a rec hall. Then they came to a large staircase that they took that led them into a different wing of the hospital. Sebastian could feel that this was the right direction. Blood boiled in passionate expectation that he'd find the woman he died for. He wanted her. He needed her. All the terror he had suffered in the last few months would finally end as soon as he could see Evie again. He wanted to see her beautiful eyes and smile, and he knew in his heart that she would come back to him just as they were before Mary shot him, before she had fallen for Christian Evans. I don't think we're going to find her, Georgina whispered. You can't give up yet. I'll find her. I'll find her, Sebastian said, her eyes focused, peeking into each room they passed. Sebastian, listen to me, Georgina said, grabbing his arm as they passed room after room. Maybe we should just stop. She's here for a reason, and not only that, we know that she's moved on from you. Maybe we should go, Sebastian. This could be dangerous if anyone saw you, she whispered back. His eyes quickly turned from hopeful and romantic to dramatic and dark. He pushed Georgina up to the wall of the hallway and hissed in her face. He felt her reluctant and saw it as a threat to what he wanted. She was not attempting to stop him from getting his Evie back, You promised me you'd help me. I gave you this body. You promised, he growled, his anger so strong he was unable to control it. Such was the side effect of his new life as the undead vampire. Georgina wasn't one of one to be pushed on. She had had enough of what Jacob when she lived as Mary and reached up for her loose hand and slapped Sebastian across the face. His head whipped to one side, and he realized how and what he was doing. The angry vampire quickly vanished from his face, and the old Sebastian in love and lost came back. I just need her. You have to understand, he said softly as the orderlies in the other room continued to claim. She's moved on, Sebastian. She's moved on, Georgina said. No, she hasn't. She couldn't have. She only did what with Christian because she thought I was gone. He took advantage of her. He took advantage of the fact I wasn't there. She loves me. She still loves me, Sebastian shouted as Georgina rushed up to him and put her finger to his lips to hush him. She knew Sebastian loved Evie. He could see it. This man, this monster that she helped create was something she was beginning to pity. There were cousin they were cousins and now partners in crime, and she couldn't bear to see him suffering, even if her heart of hearts hurt that Evie was a lost cause to him. Cousin, I don't know what you're going to find when we find her. Are you prepared for anything? You should be, but when and if we do find her, just promise me you'll remember that what happened between Christian Evans and between the both of them, it wasn't one-sided, Georgina said. Sebastian took that to heart and nodded. I know, he said softly. You there, what are you doing here? A voice shouted from the corners of the hall. It was an orderly on night duty. He walked over and quickly to the couple. Georgina gasped in shock that they had been caught. Sebastian's eyes turned black, his teeth extended from his mouth. It was time for him to feed, after all. I asked you a question, the orderly said sternly, only seeing Sebastian from behind. Sebastian slowly turned to face the man, and when they finally made eye contact, the orderly gasped and hit the face of a man who was not a man who was not alive, a man who had not seen the sun in almost a year. Sebastian, the undead, hissed in the face of the orderly, who gasped and dropped his clipboard to the floor. Step back! Step back! The orderly screamed. But Sebastian and was on a mission. No one, would stand in his way. The vampire lunged, and the orderly and they began to fight. The man punched Sebastian in the gut. Sebastian felt nothing. He wasn't even winded. Sebastian grinned at the orderly, almost as if he was proud of him for trying, but there was no use. No blow from a fist would stop his his hungry heart. Sebastian lunged, mouth agape. The man clamped down in his thick neck. The pain was so much that the orderly could not even vocalize it. The blood came squirting from his neck and down his chest, soaking his white hospital uniform. It was so sweet on Sebastian's tongue. Sebastian closed his eyes in ecstasy as the sweet blood of the orderly oozed down his throat and quenched his thirst for human blood. The pleasure was ripe, and so ripe the vampire bit down harder on the unlucky orderly's throat, killing him. Georgina turned away, covering her face, trying to keep the image from being seared into her brain for all time. Sebastian had seemingly turned into Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. 1 minute sensitive and kind, searching for the wrong love of his life, and the next time he was bloodthirsty monster searching for his next meal. Georgina feared him, yet she cared for him at the same time. Minutes passed. They felt like hours as the orderly died in Sebastian's grip. Sebastian carefully dragged his dead body into a closet in the hallway, cleaned his face of the blood, and came back to Georgina, who was frozen in shock. It had to be done, Sebastian said softly, back to his kind Dr. Jekyll stance. Keep telling yourself that? Georgina, when she was married, helped create Sebastian the vampire with her mother. Eliza nodded in agreement. She knew it had to be done too, and so much more events like this would most likely continue if Sebastian was to survive. The two gathered themselves up and again calmed their nerves. They continued to search for Evie, hoping that was the only orderly on night duty in that ward. As they continued to search, Sebastian could feel her close. It was as if she was a honing signal to his heart. He could again feel her heartbeat. He could again feel her blood pumping and matching his heartbeat. He followed the feeling of her body, of her breathing. Evie, too, asleep in her bed, confused and knocked out from a terrible night with Dr. Kim, tossed and turned in a white padded room where a straitjacket kept her snug in a white linen lined coat. Evie felt as if she had a fever. Her heart was beating so hard she was beginning to feel dizzy in her sleep. She opened her eyes and fell from the cot, sweating profusely. She could feel something coming too, but she had no idea who. Then he appeared. Sebastian had traveled back from the dead, over the sea, over so much pain and sorrow, and into the hospital that was his own family had wrongfully kept her trapped in. Finally found his lost love locked away in the room, tied to a bed, wrapped in a straitjacket, ill and in pain. He could sense her pain through the wall. He could sense her illness. Something dark was upon her, and she was truly sick and near death without anyone in the hospital even knowing or perhaps even caring. Sebastian put his hand up against the door. His power by Georgina's eyes was strong, and went through the door, and the door unlocked as if they had placed a key in the lock and turned it. The door opened, and he found her in a lump on the floor. Her hair, brown and curly and beautiful, covered her gorgeous face. Georgina gasped at the sight of the once especially dressed and always put together Evie, and how far she had fallen. They're killing her, Sebastian said as he quickly went to the floor and rolled Evie over. I'm here, my love. I'm here to save you, Sebastian whispered. Evie turned over. She could see his blurry face through the rogue strands of brown hair. She squinted and thought her fever of whatever illness was attacking her was making her feel strange and see strange things. Sebastian, she asked in a weak voice, is that you? She said, believing her hallucination. Hurry, hurry, Georgina said from the door. Sebastian looked back at Georgina and nodded his head and then ripped off the legs around Evie's wrist and scooped her up from the floor. He could feel her body's heat. It was like a furnace burning from inside out coming through her skin. Then, like three flashes of the bright, they were out of the room and into the hallway. They quickly made their way back the way they came, to freedom, and not a single person at the hospital was the wiser, or so they thought. As the clock struck 2 more morning in the morning, someone had been there the whole time, watching and waiting. It was Alice Winterbourne, Evie's new friend from Wincliffe. Alice watched. She didn't make a noise. She followed them through the hospital and the darkened corridor. She kept up pace as the way until they rode out of the hospital and the fresh, cool night air of the mainland. Now free too, she watched as her friend Evie was and the two strangers made their way down the long pathway to the town nearest to the hospital where Sebastian and Georgina had set up a boat rental earlier that day before their arrival at Wincliffe. The small boat filled up to its rims with the three passengers and needed to get them back to Good Island, where Sebastian could finally have his life with Evie back and one of his family would ever stop them. Or no one, sorry. All before the sun rose in the sky. Alice did not make herself known to Sebastian or Georgina. As she shadowed them, she was left alone in a large thicket of trees until she felt it was safe to her to come out. A few hours passed, but then she went along the road and followed it on foot for miles and miles. And finally, she got to the edge of the mainland. She saw the island of Welshport off in the distance. She smiled, remembering the happy time she had on the island, and thought that perhaps now that she too was free and she could get some of that back, and maybe even find her friend Evie again. The waves on the shore crashed on the rocks, and Alice slowly made her way down a sloped edge and took off her shoes. The water was ice cold on her feet. She could feel frigid liquid in her bones, and the slippery rocks below, cold from the sea's touch, was slippery from the moss. She then slowly made her way into the sea. Her skirt began to float up. The deeper she got, and Alice could feel a rush of cooking blood flood her mind. The water then began to come up from her knees to her thighs, to her stomach, to her chest, to her chin, to her forehead. As the water made contact with her skin, a striking alchemical reaction occurred. Every inch of her body that absorbed the seawater began to change into a translucent scale-like surface. The area between her fingers, the toes, became webbed. Her eyes suddenly had a glass look orb that came over both of them, and their color changed from a chestnut brown to a golden tone that glittered beneath the fractures of light that crest over the surface of the ocean. Finally, three little slits on either side of her head behind her eyes opened up as gills. Alice could and did live in the sea. Then, if she had been waiting for the very moment to return to her watery work, Alice disappeared below the dark blue water. She was completely submerged in the ocean and did not surface. She was with the water, one with the sea. Alice wanted to find her destiny, her connection to the earth, and away from Wincliffe. It was as if all the years she spent there, Evie had finally unlocked the part of her mind that made Alice who she was. Alice was gone now, deep in the dark water of the Frenchman Bay. The waves called to her, and so did the light from the lighthouse on Welshport, calling for Alice to finally come home. On a blistering sunny morning over at Terrymore House, the breakfast table was busy with the Lord family clicking their orange juice glasses and eating their morning hard-boiled eggs sitting on their sterling silver pedestal. Rebecca nervously sipped her coffee and kept one hand under the table as Sebastian's signet ring rolled around in like scolding her marble. She eloquently looked at the clock, wondering when or if she should tell her family about what she found in the cemetery, or rather what she didn't find. Their prince's body missing from its coffin. Charlotte noticed her grandmother's nerves that made her and Sabrina inside her just as uneasy, causing her to anxiously play with the eggs on her plate. "Don't play with your food," Jacob growled from the opposite side of the table. "It's disgusting." "Where is Celeste?" Rebecca asked as the clock in the hall chimed 8 in the morning. "She's late." "Is she? Indeed she is," Jacob said as the clock again chimed in an hour. "Unlike her, isn't it?" he added. "Very much unlike her, Charlotte dear. Why don't you drink up your juice if you're finished, and run around up to your room and get your books ready for Mr. Vinny when Mr. Vinny arrives. She will be pleased to see you're all set for her lesson," Rebecca ordered. Charlotte looked at her grandmother, then at her father, who didn't say another word. The tension was growing between the two, and Charlotte had conspired to kill her father with Celeste just 48 hours before, nodded her head and excused herself. The tension filled the breakfast table. She didn't go far. She quickly hid behind the large pillar of stone that stood outside the breakfast room and eavesdropped on her father and grandmother. So tell me, what did you do? Rebecca asked as Charlotte went out of sight. Whatever do you mean? He asked, cutting his eggs with his forks and slipping them up with a loud slurping sound. Don't play coy. I saw her leave here later than she usually does. After Charlotte had gone to bed, there was no reason for her to be here that late. And today she's uncharacteristically late. I'm very bad at a small talk, Jacob, but I'm very good at math. I could put two and two together, Rebecca replied. We chatted for a while, that's all. Can I chat with employees? I do when I go into the city and to the office. What is the difference with chatting with Celeste? Jacob asked. The difference is the agents at our publishing house in the city don't work in close proximity to your bedroom and are not beautiful women, and I have seen you staring at her on various occasions. Did you hurt her? Rebecca asked bluntly. Mother, for God's sake. I'm 46 years old, damn it, Jacob yelled back, slamming his fist to the table, startling Charlotte listening around the door. Yet Rebecca did not flinch. Must you always attempt to turn around on me, things around me like I'm a child? I know you too well, Rebecca replied, as a servant came bring them more coffee and juice in sparkling crystal pitchers from servants' exit on the opposite side of the room. You're always trying to paint me the villain. Always, Jacob said, grabbing his coffee from the servant and pouring it himself as he felt a twinge of his resentment towards his mother's love bubbles. You do a good job of that yourself, Jacob, but I'll just warn you now, should you have hurt that girl in any way, the price will be very hefty for you. She's a woman, she's not hurt, Jacob replied to his mother's disgust. Ma'am, sir, there is someone here to see you both. I said you were both at breakfast, but he insisted, the coffee servant said. Upon Charlotte hearing this, Charlotte quickly hid behind the large potted plant. She needed to hear the rest of the conversation. Who? Jacob wondered. It's rather early, Rebecca answered. It's Constable Evans, the servant answered. Well, bring him in. Lord knows he's got much to answer for. Missing Mary, missing Georgina, a bloody alternate in our midst. Bring him bring him in, Jacob shouted to the poor servant. Yes, sir, of course, the servant answered as he quickly scoffed through the doorway and off to usher in Christian Evans. Now, we'll see what he has to say, Jacob said to Rebecca, who continued to roll Sebastian's ring in her hand, feeling Christian was about to drop a bomb on Jacob about the return of their dead relative. Constable Evans, the servant said, announcing Christian's entrance to the breakfast room. Jacob, Rebecca, Christian said, looking like he hadn't slept. Constable, we are both hoping that you're interrupting our quiet breakfast to give us good news on Mary and Georgina, Jacob said. Well, yes and no. Georgina is still missing, but we did receive this, Christian said, sliding an open envelope across the table to Jacob, who looked at Christian with a curled lip because of his disavowed appearance. It's from Mary's mother, Eliza. Rebecca replied, pulling the letter from Jacob's hand. It was the name she hadn't said in years. It seems as though Mary had done the unthinkable. The reason why we can't find her is because she's dead, Christian replied. Charlotte gasped. Under the palms of the pod plant, she was hidden under the news of her mother, Mary. Dead. Bull, Jacob shouted of his ex-Mary's demise. In this note, Eliza says she drowned. Were we just hearing this now? Rebecca asked, unsure if she should believe this letter. In the last paragraph, you'll see Eliza said she warned She wanted to mourn her daughter in peace before she told anyone. She wanted to give some time for herself, Christian replied. That coward, that coward. She kills Sebastian and does something toward Georgina and just takes the easy way out. Why don't accept it? She's a coward, and I'll make sure all the papers under our publishing firm writes that in her obituary, Jacob said cruelly. She's your daughter's mother. You'll do nothing of the sort, Rebecca replied. Constable, it's important we find out Georgina. You've wasted enough time on Mary Good to the point she took her own life. Let's not have yet another mistake like this happen again. It's imperative, to find Georgina as soon as possible, added Rebecca. I'm afraid I've been doing my best to do that, but we've had also been preoccupied with another matter, Evie, Christian said to Rebecca and Jacob, both scoffing, annoyed with his obsession with their married and family member. So they coldly placed in who they cold if they so coldly placed in an insane asylum. Oh, Constable, please. I've told you once, I've told you before. You need to let Evangeline do what she needs to do and take care of her mental health, Rebecca said. You've done enough damage in that department, Christian, old chap. I'd listen to my mother if I were you, Jacob replied. But if I could only be with her, if I could only be together, I would focus on making sure everything else in my life was put together. I love her. Can't you see? I'd take care of her. You couldn't have to anymore. She and I would be us, and you'd be free of supporting her, Chris replied, in a begging tone of the voice. Out of the question. You should talk to that lawyer I saw you with the other day. He, I was right. Evie is our family forever, Rebecca said. Lawyer, Jacob asked of the man Rebecca met and was introduced as Evie's lawyer, but was truly Evie's brother Nicholas. I just wish I could be, Christian said before being interrupted by Dr. Kim, who rushed into the breakfast room. What the devil? Jacob shouted. Kim, what are you doing? Rebecca stood up, the ring still burning in her hand. I tried to tell him you shouldn't be interrupted. I'm sorry, the servant said nervously, trying to push Dr. Kim back out of the room. It's Evie, Kim replied. I got in on the first ferry out here. Evie is gone. She escaped last night with another patient. They're both gone, Kim said, breathing heavily after running into the room. She must be coming here. She must be looking for me, Christian replied in a strange outburst out of nowhere. Everyone looked over at Christian. The once smart and astute constable had fallen into a strange mindset since that night Evie was taken and saw Gaspar's mutilated body. His mind was turning to a confused, sad place for the fantasy and childlike naivety that only made his credibility in town shrink further away from his grasp. This is insanity. How could you have allowed this? Rebecca screamed at Dr. Kemp. Incompetence, mother. Incompetence, Jacob yelled back. I assure you, we didn't. We kept our patients safe and locked in their cells at night, but Dr. Kim began before Rebecca hushed him. We have to find her, Rebecca said, her voice sizzling with anger and worry that Sebastian would find her first, that is, if he hadn't already. Covering behind the plant, Charlotte held her breath. Inside her mind, the spirit of Sabrina Lord knew this was a sign that perhaps the cracks of the facade of the Lord family were beginning to crack. It's happening. It's happening, Sabrina voices said in Charlotte's mind. This must have been Sebastian, she added. In the chaos of Dr. Kim's entrance, Christian rushed out to find Nicholas to tell him Evie had escaped. As he did, he passed the area near the front stairs where he had seen the bleeding, protect body of Gaspar deposed, bleeding profusely from the giant gash of his neck. Christian stared at the open area where Gaspar had been, and chill came over his entire body. The monster, Gaspar's voice said in Christian's memory, referring to his mother, Sebastian, Christian felt sick and rushed out to find Nicholas. Back inside the breakfast room, Jacob continued to berate the man he was paying to make sure Evie was stayed locked away. This was part of their deal. He kept her locked away, and Kim's secret would be kept locked up too. It was just another feature in Jacob's hat of secrets keeping and blackmailing. But for Kim, the idea that Evie's escape wouldn't could his secret would spill out scared him to death. Rebecca opened her hand and saw Sebastian's ring once more. This was no simple escape, Rebecca thought. She knew in her heart this was Sebastian's doing. She replaced the ring in her pocket and pulled Jacob off of Dr. Kim and slapped her son in the face and to calm down. Enough, enough, gather yourself, Rebecca ordered. Mother, how can I calm when these people, the constable, this doctor, they keep letting us down, Jacob shouted. I've done all you have asked, every little thing, yet you continue to push more and on top of me, both of you. I've gone against my ethics. I have kept Evangeline Jordan a place I don't believe she belongs, all because Dr. Kim said, defending himself just before Jacob stepped in. All because it's your job, Andrew, Jacob shouted. We did not let her go. She escaped, Dr. Kim replied. I should have your license and everything you own. And just when you think I'm done, I'll let everyone know they keep dark little secrets of yours and ruin your life for this. Evie was in your care, and you should have made sure she stayed in your care, Jacob replied. I wasn't. It wasn't Andrew, Rebecca replied softly, realizing the truth. What? Jacob asked, surprised, as he and Dr. Kim both turned to her for clarification. It's Sebastian. It's Sebastian, Rebecca said clearly, as she pulled out Sebastian's signet ring she found next to Georgina the night she was attacked and finally showed it to Jacob. Charlotte gasped in her hiding place as Sabrina, the spirit of Sebastian's mother that lived inside the young girl, realized her sister Eliza had come through with helping Sebastian come back. Jacob, too, knew that ring was his nephew when he was buried. On his nephew when he was buried. He saw it on his finger. He saw the casket close, and the ring was on Sebastian's hand. But how his ring? How do you have it? Jacob asked, his face white as a sheet. I found it next to Georgina the night she was attacked. Jacob, her wounds were like Gaspar's. This ring Sebastian had too. That's impossible, Jacob screamed. It's true. I made sure of it, Rebecca replied in a serious tone. How? Jacob wondered as Kim drank water to calm his nerves. His grave was empty. My God, what is this? Dr. Andrew Kim asked in a low, whispery voice, the bizarre accusation of Sebastian being actually alive. Jacob's eyes went blank. His heart skipped a beat. He's alive. Jacob asked, terrified the truth of his plot would come out. Rebecca took a deep breath before answering. Kim kept drinking water and calming himself after Jacob shoving and pushing an angry tirade. Rebecca then turned to the window of the breakfast room and looked out over the distance and see there floating in the water was Good Island. The only person who could tell us for sure, the only person who will give us a true answer is the real witch, Rebecca said, referring to Eliza Good, the one woman whose powers knew all. I will go see her. I will find out what she knows, Rebecca added. So that's the read along, guys. Again, really, really good scene setting. So, before I thought that there was a sea creature or something in the water around Good Island. I was right. I was right. Alice Winterbourne is a sea creature, which is really interesting. We'll see where that goes. I'm curious to see because I get the sense that there's more than just one. Like, you know what I mean? If when you're looking at the water around, here's this whole island. So here's one sea creature, and now that we have one, and if there's more, are all of them like her, or are they meaner, or they're nicer, whichever. Link will be here in the description box to Benight and Beguile, written by John Philip Bencourt. You guys have a good day.